Imagine a person who has just survived an attack by a wild animal. He ran away. He wasn't eaten. He made it back to his people. At first, it looks like the worst part is already over. But there is a deep wound on his arm. And this is exactly where the real danger begins. Because in the ancient world, a person could survive a spear strike, an animal bite, a fall from a cliff, or a cut from a stone knife, and then die a few days later from something he could not even see. From infection, not from a lion, not from a bear, not from an enemy, but from a tiny invisible world that entered the body through open skin and started killing him from the inside. Today, if you cut your hand badly, you basically know what to do. You wash it with water. You use antiseptic. You cover it with a bandage. If the wound is deep, you go to a doctor. Maybe they give you stitches. Maybe they prescribe antibiotics. All of this feels normal to us. But for almost all of human history, none of this existed. There were no antibiotics, no hospitals, no sterile bandages, no ambulance, no gloves, no alcohol, no surgical lights, and no understanding of what bacteria were. There was only skin, blood, dirt, stones, animal teeth, leaves, fire, pain, and one terrifying truth. Even a small wound could become a death sentence. And yet, your ancestors survived. Not once, not by accident, not just because they were lucky. They survived for hundreds of thousands of years. So the real question is not why ancient humans died from wounds. The real question is, how did they not die from them all the time? Because the answer is much more interesting than it seems. For us, a cut is a small thing. Unpleasant, but not scary. But for a person 40,000 years ago, a cut was the beginning of a countdown. Any open wound was a doorway into the body. Through it, dirt, food remains, animal saliva, soil, swamp water, rotting material, and everything people did not yet have names for could get inside. If the wound started turning red, swelling, filling with pus, if the person got a fever, if he became weak, that could mean the end. There were no pills. There was no doctor to explain what was happening. But that does not mean ancient people were helpless. For a long time, many people imagined ancient medicine as a mix of random herbs, rituals, and hope. Like someone put something on a wound, prayed, and then it was just a matter of luck. But that idea is too simple. In reality, ancient people were incredibly careful observers. They watched what happened to the body. They noticed what made a wound worse. They remembered what helped a person survive. They tried things, made mistakes, tried again, and passed that knowledge on. They did not have microscopes, but they had experience. And they understood one important thing. Some things made death come faster, and some things gave the body a chance. One of the oldest and most surprising treatments was honey. Today, honey is something sweet we put in tea, a kitchen product, a jar on a shelf. But to an ancient person, honey was almost like medicine from another world. It is thick. It is sticky. It covers the wound. It pulls out moisture. Many microbes do not do well in that kind of environment. Honey is acidic, and some types of honey, when they touch moisture, produce small amounts of substances that make it harder for bacteria to grow. Ancient Egyptians used honey to treat wounds thousands of years ago. They put it on dressings, mixed it with other substances, and applied it to damaged skin. The most amazing part is not that honey worked. The most amazing part is that they did not know why. They did not know the word bacteria. They did not understand that invisible organisms were living inside wounds. They simply saw the result. Wounds treated with honey rotted less often, healed better, and the person had a better chance of surviving. Think about that. Long before modern medicine, people were already using a natural substance that really helped fight infection. They did not know the theory, but they knew the practice. And honey was only the beginning. Another ancient weapon was resin. When a tree gets wounded, resin flows out of it. It closes the damage and protects the tree from insects, fungus, and decay. Ancient people saw this again and again. A tree is wounded. The tree releases a sticky mass. The wound closes. And one day, a person understood. If this protects a tree, maybe it can protect me too. Pine resin, birch tar, and other similar substances were used like natural glue and a protective layer. Resin could close a cut, keep dirt from getting inside, keep insects away, and sometimes even slow down the growth of microbes. Basically, ancient people copied survival technology from nature itself. They watched how a tree healed, and they used that idea on the human body. Then there were plants. Yarrow, willow, garlic, moss, plantain, comfrey, different leaves, roots, bark, juices, and herbs that people in different parts of the world used for wounds, pain, swelling, and bleeding. Ancient people did not open medical textbooks. They learned slowly and harshly. Someone put a leaf on a wound and felt better. Someone used another herb and got worse. Someone noticed that one plant helped stop bleeding. Someone saw that another reduced pain. Someone realized that moss absorbed blood well and could work almost like a bandage. Every successful attempt became knowledge. Every mistake could cost a life. That is how medicine was born, not in laboratories, but on the ground, near the fire, in the middle of fear, blood, and pain. And the most interesting thing is that some of these ancient methods really made sense. Willow bark contains substances similar in effect to the base of aspirin. Garlic has properties that can stop some microbes. Some plants tighten tissue and help slow bleeding. Moss can work as an absorbent material. Ancient people did not know chemistry, but they knew. This helps. And then there was fire. And this is where everything becomes much harsher. Today, the idea of burning a wound sounds almost like torture. And in the ancient world, it really was terrible. But sometimes it saved lives. If a person was bleeding badly, the blood had to be stopped quickly. A hot stone, hot metal, or a burned tool could seal blood vessels. It was frightening, painful, and rough, but sometimes there was no other choice. Imagine this scene. No painkillers, no operating room, no clean tools. A wounded person is held down by several others. A stone or piece of metal is heated in the fire. Then it is pressed against the wound. The smell of burning flesh. Screaming. Smoke. Panic. But if the alternative was dying from blood loss or slowly rotting from infection, then pain became the price of survival. To us, it sounds barbaric. To them, it may have been the only chance. But one of the strangest ways to treat wounds was not connected to honey, herbs, or fire. It was connected to maggots. For a modern person, maggots in a wound are horror, a sign of dirt, rot, and neglect. It feels like if worms appear in a wound, everything is lost. But nature often works in ways that are stranger than we want to believe. Some fly larvae mainly eat dead tissue. They eat what has already started to decay, and they mostly leave healthy tissue alone. And that means that in certain conditions, they can clean a wound. Yes, it sounds disgusting. But sometimes this was exactly what helped remove dead flesh that was stopping the wound from healing. Some ancient and traditional societies seem to have noticed this. They saw that not every wound with maggots ended in death. Sometimes, strange as it sounds, those wounds became cleaner and healed better. Maggots were not only a symbol of rot. Sometimes they became part of the treatment. And the most amazing thing is that modern medicine later came back to this idea. Treatment with special sterile maggots is still used today in some cases, when doctors need to clean difficult wounds from dead tissue. What looks like a nightmare can sometimes become a tool for survival. But ancient wound treatment was not only about what you put on the skin. It was about the people around you. Because a wounded person in the ancient world almost never survived alone. If your leg was broken, you could not hunt. If you had a deep wound, you could not run from a predator. If you had a fever, you could not search for water. If you were weak, you could not defend yourself. A wounded person alone was almost doomed. That is why the group was the main medicine. Archaeologists have found remains of ancient people with serious injuries that had healed long before death. This means a person received a severe injury, but continued living, sometimes for years. And that is impossible without help. Someone brought him food. Someone gave him water. Someone protected him when he could not walk. Someone cleaned his wounds. Someone changed his dressings. Someone did not leave him behind. And maybe this is the most important point in the whole history of ancient medicine. The strongest medicine was not honey, not resin, not herbs, and not even fire. The strongest medicine was other people. Before antibiotics, the human body did not survive by itself. It survived inside a circle of hands. Hands that carried water. Hands that gathered herbs. Hands that held a person during pain. Hands that pressed moss against blood. Hands that pulled honey from a hive. Hands that scraped resin from a tree. Hands that tried to bring a person back to life as much as they could. Ancient people did not have modern medicine, but they had observation, memory, patience, courage, and an enormous amount of experience collected through pain. Every scar was a lesson. Every survivor was proof. Every mistake became a warning. Every successful method was passed on, from elders to the young, by the fire, in stories, in gestures, in habits. That is how knowledge lived long before books. Someone once said, "Do not wash the wound with that water. It makes it worse." Someone said, "Put this plant on it. It stops the blood." Someone said, "Honey helps." Someone said, "Resin closes the wound." Someone said, "If you leave dead tissue there, the person will die." And slowly, from these observations, medicine was born. Not perfect, not safe, not always correct, but real, because it was built around the most important question: what helps a person live until tomorrow? And this is why the whole story still matters to us. Today, we often take medicine for granted. Bandages, antiseptic, antibiotics, stitches, clean water, all of this feels like a normal part of life. But behind every simple action, there is a huge history. A history of people who did not know what microbes were, but were already fighting them. People who did not know chemistry, but understood the power of plants. People who did not know sterility, but noticed that dirt kills. People who could not explain infection, but saw how it took lives. The next time you put a bandage on a small cut and forget about it 5 minutes later, remember, once, a wound like that could have gathered the whole group around a person. Someone would have brought water. Someone would have found moss. Someone would have gone looking for resin. Someone would have climbed to a hive for honey. Someone would have sat nearby through the night, so the person would not die alone. For us, a wound is a small thing. For an ancient person, a wound was a test of the body, a test of knowledge, a test of luck, and a test of how hard others were willing to fight for you. Every person alive today comes from those who once passed that test, from those who survived without antibiotics, without hospitals, without sterile tools, and without understanding the invisible world that was trying to kill them through open skin. They did not know the enemy by name, but they learned how to fight it. And maybe that is the main lesson. Humanity survived not because it was stronger than nature. It survived because it knew how to observe, remember, help each other, and turn pain into knowledge. In a world where we often forget how fragile life was before modern medicine, the story of ancient wounds reminds us of one important thing. What feels simple today was once the result of thousands of years of fear, mistakes, care, and survival. The bandage on your hand is not just a piece of material. It is the end of a very long chain. In that chain, there were people who put honey on wounds, people who closed cuts with resin, people who burned wounds with fire because there was no other way, people who stayed beside the wounded even when those wounded people could no longer be useful. And that is why this experience is worth remembering. Not because ancient people were wiser than us in everything, but because they lived in a world where every mistake could be the last and still managed to pass on the most important things to us: knowledge, care, and the will to survive. If this story made you look differently at an ordinary bandage, a small cut, or the idea of medicine itself, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Here, we do not just talk about the past. We look at how humans became who they are today, through pain, fear, discoveries, mistakes, and the incredible ability to not give up. If you want to support videos like this, leave a like, write a comment, and subscribe. Your support really helps me keep making deep and interesting stories about things that seem ordinary until you learn what stands behind them. I already have the next topics prepared, and they will be just as unexpected. See you in the next video.